From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Ahead today, K-State's Ajay Sharda talks about a new research project looking into using thermal crop images to improve irrigation efficiency, using drones to capture those images to create crop water stress maps that you producers could use to more effectively target your irrigation where needed in the field. Also, K-State's Walt Fick will comment on the current state of native pastures around Kansas, some of which remain under drought stress, and he'll talk about controlling two invasive plant species in our pastures, roughleaf dogwood and smooth sumac. Later this week's K-State Horticulture segment, Raymond Cloyd addresses spider mite concerns in landscape plantings and garden vegetables. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Thanks for listening in. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Well, K-State and its research team have been pace setters over the years in developing ideas and technology in the cause of irrigation efficiency. And here's one more effort along that line that is being worked on as we speak, and it shows tremendous promise. This is the use of imagery from crop fields to more accurately schedule irrigation, and we'll hear more now about it from a precision agricultural engineer, K-State Research and Extension, Ajay Sharda. Well, Ajay, this is just the latest round of irrigation efficiency work that we see out of K-State, but this one is a little special, isn't it?
It is definitely, especially when we talk to a lot of irrigation specialists and people who are interested in knowing the variability of soil moisture within the fields, the ability to understand what sensors are available and what we can use to make decisions. This is definitely special because some of our previous work, we have been really fascinated to see that you can look at a field from a holistic perspective and start to tell which portions of the field are thirsty for water more versus the other. So this really gives farmers a very strong metrics to understand how the moisture is being taken up by the crops, or in other ways, how much moisture is available in different areas of the field for those crops and how to manage that.
And this is happening, to be specific here, by way of the use of thermal infrared cameras, drones flying those cameras over a crop field, right?
Absolutely. I think I've talked about this in some of our previous talks, that these cameras have shown a lot of potential in terms of sensing canopy temperatures, which are direct measure of how much soil moisture is available or how much water is available for those crops to take up, which is just fascinating. So what we want to do, our intention is, this is our first field scale work. That's the most fascinating part. We have done a lot of work in the lab in a controlled environment, but we want to see what is the value, what is the potential of this technology on a field scale. So this study as we are putting up in Topeka this year.
In the Kansas River Valley.
In the Kansas River Valley, yes, sir. And it's a 4.5 acre study. We have 3 different levels of irrigations, and we'll be putting up thermal cameras on the unmanned aerial systems, and we'll be capturing the aerial imagery, and then from that extracting the canopy temperatures and making sense of crop water stress on a spatial scale, both spatial and temporal, all along the growth of the corn crop throughout the next 2.5 months.
Will you be doing this on intervals throughout that 2.5 month period then, once a week or once every 2 weeks? What?
Yes, I think the crop was set in the field on 24th of April. It's very much ready to get things rolling. We have gone out and geotagged every single treatment. I think we have 50% irrigation, 75% irrigation, and 100% irrigation as treatments. We have put John Deere Field Connect soil moisture probes. It's going to give us the sense of soil moisture in a 40-inch profile at multiple locations within each treatment. So that is all set. So what our goal is, Kansas weather, winds and clouds and all that stuff. But our goal is that we would like to go out and capture imagery once every week.
It'll be a comprehensive process, and at the end, you're hoping to arrive at what you're terming crop water stress index maps. And that will be the tool by which a producer could potentially make decisions on their irrigation applications, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is our first year. Our first and foremost goal is to develop an accurate canopy temperature maps, and then make sure that those maps truly represent the crop area on the ground. That's the number one goal. The second goal is to look at what you just talked about, convert those canopy temperature maps into the crop water stress index maps. So once we have those maps, we can have a lot of understanding. I don't know, but we have irrigation engineers, Danny Rogers, on the study. So we will see that are those maps are sufficient enough on their own, or are we going to combine that information along with the evapotranspiration and information available from those fields, and then club it all together into a single model? But the beauty of all this, which every time I talk to Danny Rogers, is that it's not going to be, one moisture sensor giving a sense of the whole field. You will have a sense of the entire field from that perspective. Another very, very good point, which I feel very excited about this, is that we will have some information about the crop canopy and how much moisture is needed. We'll give that moisture, we'll go out and fly, and then we will have information before and after that irrigation as well. So it will be sort of a first feedback chain of what decisions I made and what was the response of the crop for that decisions. And I think that will be the biggest understanding in terms of, because I have case study after case study, means every irrigation is a case study, because I can arrive at a decision, I can schedule an irrigation, and I can again fly to see, okay, so what was the impact of my decisions? How do I want to tweak them? Where the water is going, and then we can start to understand more based on the weather part, the soil types, and crop, and all that.
Again, in the early stages of this work, but it's presumed that if this operates as intended, great efficiencies could be gained in irrigation, could they not?
No doubt about it. We have seen time and again that, like in every other crop input, the needs of the crop are quite variable on a spatial scale. And what we think is that even if you can save irrigation, in a year, or if you can better utilize your precision irrigation technologies, because you'll have a much better sense of what the crop is saying. And I understand when people are trying to schedule irrigation, I do not want to lose yield.
Right.
And I want to make sure that every portion of my field is well irrigated. But when you have a kind of a heartbeat of the crop, or a sense of what's happening on the field in front of you, over and over again, then you start to feel more and more comfortable in holding back, either scheduling a day later or a couple of days later, or saying, hey, I'm pretty sure this portion doesn't need it. I know it because I have confidence in this data. I think that is the point where a lot of efficiencies will come along, because of we will know what is the requirement in terms of the soil moisture depletion and how much we need to kind of put it back for crops to comfortably grow.
And taking that one further, a producer over time could establish historical patterns of those needs and plan accordingly then.
Yeah. This is a wonderful point, because it's all about perspective. If I start to know, how different areas of my field are responding to certain irrigation levels, because partly it is the moisture taken up by the crop, but partly what happens to the water in those areas. Where does the water flow in, whether it is a soil texture type of the thing which is not retaining water. So you will get an idea, okay, so if I give 100 units or 10 units to each section, which areas are going to utilize better. I think that would be a fantastic thing. Another thing is what you talk about, you can better select hybrids, from that perspective. And I think another thing we would kind of know along the way is how to use our pivots, because when you're taking an imagery, you can quickly take an imagery on a bigger field. Yeah, we might need multiple flights today for a quarter of a section, but very soon, I'm sure if people find more and more value, we can fly 2 or 3 of those UAS systems simultaneously in conjunction, which are very much kind of orchestrated flight. So they are well apart from each other, but they are covering the field at the same time. But then how do you move your pivot? Because the pivots are still going to move at a pace. So I think that'll be another thing to learn. But overall, like you said, we'll know how my soils are behaving. You'll know which hybrid might work better there, how to better use my water, and definitely, the water use efficiency will go up.
This is an extremely promising project that will take place this summer once again near Topeka in the Rossville area in the Kansas River Valley, looking at this system and how one can evaluate the needs of a corn crop under pivot. So we wish you and your team all the best as you carry this out, and looking forward to the results from it as well, AJ.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for coming over and letting us know about this. He's Ajay Sharda, Precision Agricultural Engineer, K-State Research and Extension. Again, they'll be utilizing airborne thermal infrared cameras as well as ground sensors to gauge the water needs, very site-specific of corn, turning that information around to more precisely apply irrigation water for optimum efficiency. We'll await the results eagerly from this work. Agriculture Today. We'll be back in a moment. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Visiting now with Range and Pasture Management Specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Walt Fick, about a couple of points regarding grassland management, the general condition of our pastures in the state as we're working our way now into the summer months, and some thoughts today on controlling a couple of the invasive species that do hamper our grass productivity if they're not taken care of, roughleaf dogwood and smooth sumac. But first, Walt, your observations on how our grasslands are doing around Kansas. There are pockets where pastures look pretty good, and there are others that are clearly drought-stressed, right?
I think that's a good statement, Eric. And I haven't traveled the entire state, but I've been kind of monitoring, the drought monitor and looking at monthly precipitation totals, which will tell us a lot about how things are going. I think most of the state, you look like last winter, we were dry and drought was pretty widespread. That's improved some now with this spring. April was a cold month. We didn't have, in fact, most counties were probably below normal precipitation in April as well. And so we kind of had a slow start to the spring. But then May happens, and it got warm in a hurry. It sped things up. Most places have received fairly significant amounts of rainfall. So I think most places in the state, the grass is green and growing. Here we are nearly middle June now, and that can be an important date is because about half of our forage production usually occurs by the middle of June. So one can go and look at that and see whether are we close to that or are we running behind? Because pasture conditions will depend on what happens rainfall-wise, in the next month and through the summer.
So that's the benchmark you would look at as far as whether an individual who does have a droughty pasture needs to make a move, and that is to say, note the grass growth and where it stands and whether it's up to the normal progress?
That's one way to approach it. And like I say, mid-June we're about 50% normal production. Mid-July we should be 75%. So one can try to estimate, what production levels are and compare that to normal. Or the other way to look at it is we can sit down and, estimate forage production in the pasture, and based on the number of head we have out there, how long is that going to last if we don't get, significant more regrowth? And one could then determine whether or not we need to start destocking or not. Good managers probably have a drought management plan in place, and hopefully they will follow that. It's always better to have something like that set so that such and such happens, you make decisions and you don't worry about it. You've got that down on paper and you can proceed. On the other hand, sometimes we just fly by the seat of our pants and go with whatever happens. But a lot of the forage production can yet be determined. If it continues to rain in the pastures, these animals will start spot grazing. And what they rely on then is they'll eat the regrowth. Mm-hmm. So even though total forage production could be down, if it continues to rain and we get that regrowth, that can supply good forage and good quality forage for some time.
But stay on top of it really is the point here, because the conditions can turn with these unusually high temperatures for early June. Those pastures can brown fairly quickly in those drier areas.
The warm temperatures, I think, sped things up. Yeah. So there's some plants that may be trying to produce seed heads, quicker than normal, and of course that's not good for forage quality when they do that. But it's been a strange year in terms of start. We know cold and then hot, and plants are kind of responding to those patterns.
Monitor what's going on there. Well, Walt, for the bulk of our time here, let's look at controlling these two species, which are headaches for many a pasture manager out there: roughleaf dogwood, smooth sumac, and let's talk about the characteristics of each.
Well, those are both fairly common shrubs that we get on range land and other types of land as well in the state. You look at a distribution map, the eastern two-thirds. You get out in the high plains, you aren't going to see those species too much unless you're in some areas that got some topography or slope to them. Then you might find them, but they're both shrubs. Dogwood, if left unattended, it can get 10 feet tall. Usually grows in clumps. I know one of the things that they found out on the Konza Prairie in particular is with their different burning frequencies, their 4-year burn frequency is the absolute worst in terms of how quickly some of these shrubs invade, including the roughleaf dogwood. So, we know that fire can help keep it off if it isn't there, but if you back off and don't use fire very frequently, it's one of the ones that surely will invade. It's probably about at the end of its blooming stage right now. It produces a white flower, and then it'll produce seed, later in the year. The smooth sumac, I think it's headed out. Most places I've seen it, and I like to describe that seed head too as kind of like an open milo-looking seed head. The flowering stage and that open head seed stage on sumac are good times to think about, okay, if I need to do something, this is the time to treat them with a herbicide.
So we may be at that point in both cases for contending with those with some kind of a treatment. And are there multiple alternatives for chemical control here?
Well, yes. If I only had smooth sumac, and that's the one I was worried about, I would just recommend maybe 2 to 3 pints of 2,4-D. It's one of the few woody plants, frankly, that's very susceptible to 2,4-D at this particular stage. Dogwood, on the other hand, 2,4-D will hardly do anything to it, so it takes some other herbicides. We've studied that one some in the past, and some of our restricted use compounds, including Surmount, which is a combination of a couple of herbicides, that one works quite well on roughleaf dogwood. Turns out it would also control sumac, so if you have them both, if you just want to use one herbicide, well, Surmount might be one of the choices. something around maybe a 0.5 to 1% solution of surmount in water. Probably want to add a little bit of a non-ionic surfactant, but that would probably work on both. But again, surmount's a restricted use compound. If you didn't want to use a restricted use product, then there's a product called Pasture HL. It has relatively good activity on dogwood and would also control the sumac. Again, it's a combination of herbicides that come in as a premix, but that would work on both species. The other thing we typically recommend that works on many woody plants is we'll combine tank mix 2,4-D, Remedy Ultra, which is triclopyr, and Tordon 22K. Those three herbicides together will kill most woody plants if they're at a susceptible stage. And that mix is the way I remember that is you want to use about 2 pints of 2,4-D, a pint of the Remedy Ultra, and a pint of Tordon 22K.
And treatment window is fairly wide here for those applications?
Well, generally, here we're right now through most of June, at least early to mid-June, it should be very susceptible. You've got maybe 3 weeks and around that period of time that should work quite well.
And might mention here there are other possibilities here in the way of soil-applied materials.
Yes, there are two soil-applied products we could use. Sumac and dogwood are both kind of multi-stem, so a lot of times you look at a label. One of the dry products is called Pronone Power Pellets. Kind of looks like an Alka-Seltzer tablet. And they'll talk about putting 1 or 2 of those per stem, or probably because these plants are multi-stem, you almost want to put them out maybe in some sort of grid pattern. It is dry, so it does require some moisture to get it activated in the soil. But that one can work and can be applied, this time of the year when we expect rainfall to occur. The other one that works reasonably well in these two species is Spike 20P, 20 meaning 20% pellet. Again, that one, you put it out, I think it's 3/4 of an ounce of product per 100 square feet. But you want to apply it in the late dormant period before the ground freezes. So, get out in late November, December is when you want to put that product on. You probably could put it out as well, maybe late February, March, once the soils are thawed. We still get moisture to get it incorporated. The reason we put it out during that kind of more or less dormant period, though, is because you'll see some grass damage if you treat it other times of the year.
Some considerations there, but if roughleaf dogwood or smooth sumac are your challenges, grassland managers, there are ways of contending with those, and there is information aplenty about your alternatives based on K-State research trials in the Chemical Weed Control Guide from K-State, updated yearly. Ask about that at your local extension office or go online to the agronomy department at K-State for that. Walt, we appreciate the observations, as always, and we will hope that rainfall besets those areas that do need rainfall on our pastures in Kansas. Thanks for your time right here.
Thank you, Eric.
He is Walt Fick. He's a range and pasture management specialist with K-State Research and Extension. There's an article on chemical control of dogwood and smooth sumac, by the way, in the Agronomy E-Update series dated June the 8th. That at agronomy.ksu.edu as well. And you're tuned to Agriculture Today. Now this break. When we come back, today's agricultural news headlines and this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update for you, along with more, here on the K-State Radio Network. Stay with us.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Next up for you, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the Senate Agriculture Committee yesterday approved its 5-year farm bill. The bipartisan vote was 20-1, with only Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa opposed to the bill until he gets a payment limits amendment considered. Here's more from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
The ayes are 20 and the noes are 1. The bill is ordered reported favorably to the Senate as amended.
Senate Ag Committee Chairman Pat Roberts with the farm bill vote by the committee. The one dissenting vote from Iowa's Chuck Grassley. Nonetheless, the bill's out of committee. When will the Senate debate the bill?
We'll turn to the farm bill before the 4th of July.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
I'm hopeful that the House will get to theirs. They probably look a little different from ours, but I'm hoping they'll get to theirs shortly, which will give us a chance to get into conference and actually make a law here, which is what I know we're all intensely interested in doing.
Or as Pat Roberts put it quite intensely, with continued low farm commodity prices, uncertainties about trade, producers and their lenders need two things right now.
Certainty and predictability, especially during these very difficult times. This is absolutely paramount to any other concern.
That's one reason the Senate bill does not have the controversial changes to the nutrition assistance programs which helped bring down the House bill back in mid-May. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Now, Majority Leader McConnell does want the bill finished on the Senate floor before the Senate leaves on June the 29th for its July the 4th break. Chairman Roberts said he hopes the bill will come up next week. Senate Agriculture Ranking Member Debbie Stabenow was joking that the floor action will take only 1 hour, but Senator Roberts pointed out that the 2014 Farm Bill took only 2 days to pass. Unlike the House Agriculture Committee markup, the Senate markup has little commentary on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program because there were so few changes compared to the current program. The Senate bill advanced after amendments were adopted to allow the use of trade promotion programs in Cuba, also to raise limits on government farm loans, and to give the USDA energy programs mandatory funding. Senators filed a total of 196 amendments to the bill. 66 were incorporated into a manager's amendment, while some were offered and some were withdrawn, according to Senator Roberts. The Senate bill, for specifics here, lowers income levels for farmers to collect commodity or conservation payments from $900,000 adjusted gross income to $700,000. Grassley, though, wants to tighten language on active engagement on the farm and reestablish a tight payment cap. His amendments on those issues, though, were stalled yesterday because of technical challenges with the language in them. So Grassley now will attempt to bring his payment fight to the Senate floor. Senators from major dairy states were sounding the alarm about the situation with dairy farmers right now and the need to boost support. Kirsten Gillibrand of New York got to claim credit for her Dairy Premium Refund Act being included in the Farm Bill. That would return $77 million in insurance premiums paid by dairy producers from 2015 to last year for a program that, as she put it, left them empty-handed when milk prices plummeted. And Senator Roberts noted he expects a large share of farmers will be shifting to the price loss coverage program. He also said that bankers and others have cautioned against changing base acres. The base acre update would drop 436,000 acres from base here in Kansas alone, he said, which would lead to a 20% drop in land values. And Senators Grassley and Thune championed making changes to the Conservation Reserve Program in committee. Roberts' bill would increase the CRP acreage cap 1 million acres to 25 million acres. That compares to the House bill, which would bump up CRP to 29 million acres. Thune wants to offer a plan to increase CRP acreage up to 26.25 million acres, but his proposal would also allow landowners to hay and graze up to 1/3 of their CRP acreage every year. He said this is needed to deal with problems such as chronic drought. Thune's CRP plan would also lower the CRP rental rate to 85% of the county land rental rate on general CRP sign-up compared to 88.5% in the Senate bill right now. The House bill drops that rental rate to 80% of the county average. Roberts and Stabenow initially opposed those CRP changes, by the way, but agreed they could allow an amendment on the Senate floor. We're hoping to talk more about the Senate Farm Bill proposal out of committee with Brad Lubin of the University of Nebraska on tomorrow's broadcast. Now for you this week's Kansas soybean update. Here's Greg Akagi.
Charlie Griffin, Research Assistant Professor at Kansas State in the School of Family Studies and Human Services, joins us. And Charlie, the subject of rural mental health has become more prevalent in agriculture due to what we have seen in the ag economy across the board.
It's been a tough couple of years, and as always, when income goes down, the stress goes up. There are a lot of reasons for that. Farming is a stressful occupation in any year, but when you're struggling to get by, it's filled with unpredictability, uncontrollable factors, and unpredictable factors.
So if there is a farmer out there, a rancher, an ag worker out there who feels like they're struggling, what's the best recommended method for them to maybe talk with somebody?
Well, one of the things I'd say to start with is understand that not all, but a lot of the what we call mental health problems are anxiety and depression and high stress. And those often involve not just the mental health side, but also a financial aspect and also perhaps a legal aspect. People struggling with debts that they can't pay, delinquent loans. So I encourage people to find a way to reach out to all of that information. My strongest referral is to the Kansas Agricultural Mediation Service, and I have a toll-free number for them. It's 1-800-321-FARM, 3276. And I refer there because they are kind of the front door into people who can sit down with individual farm families and help with financial analysis, to do some projections, to get a real serious idea of exactly what condition are people in. They also understand the mental health side and are prepared to make referrals. The best referral until hopefully we can put together another farm hotline in the state, I encourage people to call their local area mental health center. So call them. But I encourage farm families to call and say, can you get me together with somebody that understands farming as well as the mental health side, so that they can start off with somebody that understands the stresses they're facing. One final resource, I would say, please consider calling your local extension office.
That's Charlie Griffin, Research Assistant Professor at Kansas State, who joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. And this is Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Coming your way now on this Agriculture Today, it's our weekly horticulture segment, and we've welcomed back in Raymond Cloyd, horticultural entomologist, K-State Research and Extension, and the insect activity in lawn and garden is fairly amped up right now, as you'd expect at this time of the year. Raymond, we do need to catch up on the bagworm situation. We should be well into their activity by now, if it's going to happen at all, right?
Absolutely. This is the period when I've seen them. You walk out, you find the young ones and even little medium-sized ones out there, and it's time to spray. We recommend probably dipel, which is a soil bacteria, which is harmless to humans and pets and fish and other organisms. It only kills caterpillars. And then products like spinosad are first lines of defense because of their minimal impact to humans and the ecology of the system include primarily natural enemies. Mm-hmm. And of course, when using these, thorough coverage of all plant parts is critical because these are primarily stomach poisons. They have to be ingested by the caterpillar to have a negative impact on them. Yeah.
And bagworms have been active for a couple of weeks so far by and large, and they will continue to be active for a time, right?
Yeah, we generally recommend about a weekly application till about the end of June, especially with the temperatures we're having too. We also recommend if you're going to spray your plants, water them the night before so you don't run into issues with burning your plants with some of these pesticides, depending on formulation. But again, the timing is critical, and thorough coverage of all plant parts is important because these are mostly stomach poisons, and though they have to be ingested to be active in the caterpillar.
Bring this up, it's not just the evergreens that can suffer from bagworm feeding. Some of our other ornamentals will play host to bagworms as well, you say?
Absolutely, Eric. The old mantra was that bagworms are only feeding on conifers. Thuya was one in arborvitae, but we've seen them on honey locust trees, roses, dogwoods, a whole assortment of what you think broadleaf evergreens. So, check your arborvitaes and thuyas and junipers first, but also check the other trees in your landscape, which could also be susceptible to bagworms.
And the same treatments would hold for those plants as well, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Very good. Well, we will hopefully get through the bagworm season here soon, but stay with that treatment regimen if you discover they are, in fact, working on your landscape ornamentals. Spider mites and the recent conditions that we've had are just ripe for these pests to be active in our landscapes and gardens.
Absolutely, Eric. The two-spotted spider mite loves it hot and dry. Lack of rainfall, the plants are stressed. You couldn't ask for a better scenario for two-spotted spider mites. They attack broadleaves and conifers, and one of the best ways to deal with them is to force a water spray to dislodge them. They don't like it wet, but we recommend that first. Is if you see them, hit them with a force of water spray. There are some soaps and oils, insecticidal soaps and horticultural oils, which you would follow. Be careful with the oil sprays. They can discolor some conifers and they can burn some plants, so be sure to read the label beforehand and also water your plants before you spray them. But yeah, these temperatures are really conducive for development right now. Give you an idea, is these temperatures are having the life cycles going from egg to adult in probably 7 to 10 days. And females can lay up to 100 eggs. So you can do the math, you can figure out these populations could explode under these types of conditions.
Now, once more, spider mites are minuscule. It's very difficult to pick them up with the naked eye. So one would identify spider mite activity how?
Well, you actually can see them, Eric. If you take a white sheet of paper with a clipboard and tap the branches, you'll see yellowish organisms with black dots on both sides of the body. That's a really clear indication of a two-spotted spider mite. The damage is going to, we call it speckling and stippling, and then eventually browning of the foliage under heavy infestation. So if you suspect spider mites, take the clipboard white piece of paper, knock it over, and then if you do see them there, then it's time to get the force of water spray and dislodge them as soon as possible. The common question we get is, well, will they come back? And the answer is no. The force of water spray is extremely physically damaging to their body. And, when they're on the ground, they're predators and beetles and other natural enemies that will probably feed on them also.
And by the way, they will potentially show up on garden vegetables as well, tomatoes in particular.
Oh, absolutely. They'll feed on all sorts of ornamentals and vegetable crops, fruit trees, and things like that. They have a very broad host range, yeah.
Tell us about another pest that's now turning up, you say, on roses, the Japanese beetle. What about it?
We're getting inquiries to Japanese beetles. The adults will be out more prevalently. They're very voracious feeders. Of course, roses or anything in that family are very susceptible. And, you have to spray or hand pick because they just inundate plants and destroy their aesthetic quality in a very short period of time. So just be leery of those. Do not use the Japanese beetle traps. They will lure more Japanese beetles into an area, and data has shown that from my colleagues in an area, so avoid that. If you're going to use them, give them to your neighbors and let them have them and work with them. But, be cognizant, hand pick if you can. Spray. The unfortunate problem is most of the sprays out there are broad spectrum and they kill everything. And so what happens if you spray for Japanese beetles, we end up with large outbreaks of two-spotted spider mite because the sprays that are being used kill all the natural enemies. And we call that secondary pest outbreak. Mm-hmm. And so I know that they can devastate roses, but hand picking, if you can, try to do that as best as possible.
And a description would be helpful here, just so folks are sure what they're looking for.
Yeah, the Japanese beetle is a very iridescent, copper-colored beetle, but it's easy to identify. It has approximately 14 white tufts of hair on its abdomen. And if you have any questions, you can send it to the Department of Entomology. You can also send images. Once you've seen one Japanese beetle, you've seen them all, we can quickly identify it for you, yeah. Because there's also something called the false Japanese beetles. I've gotten samples of those. They're also voracious feeders. And they do look like Japanese beetles, but they don't have the white tufts of hairs on the back of the abdomen.
Right. One last pest we'll touch upon this time around, squash bugs. We've visited about them earlier, but they remain quite active out there in our gardens.
Yes, they're out right now, and the females will lay eggs, and of course, the eggs are on the underside of leaves, and they're kind of coppery colored. They turn bright dark green, red, and then they hatch out into nymphs, and they're on the leaf underside, and they'll start feeding on squash, cucumbers, things like that. And they're very hard to deal with because they're on the leaf underside. So if you're going to spray for them, you got to get on the leaf underside thorough coverage. We do have an extension publication that was updated several years ago on squash bug, and so you can do a Google search, and it has good images of all the instars and life stages and provides up-to-date information on the chemical and non-chemical means of dealing with squash bug.
Very well. And we will have you back here relatively soon. Raymond, thank you for coming over.
Always look forward to it, Eric. See you soon.
He briefs us on the insect issues that might be showing up in home lawns and gardens regularly. Raymond Cloyd is a horticultural entomologist with K-State Research and Extension, and he's been along with us on this week's K-State Horticulture segment. Our time's away for today. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.